In the counter-end system, we have the concept of ahead and behind. This is just our way of talking about initiative, which is a basic concept in any martial art. When you have control of the initiative, and you are the one who is acting and dictating the course of events, you're ahead. When you don't have control of the initiative and you're reacting, you're behind. Now, one of our most common and basic fighting strategies is what we call the waiting strategy, or predatory defense, where you simply wait on guard and you respond with an effective counter technique when the opponent changes something, such as moving, changing his guard, or attempting an attack. That might seem like it's behind, but it's not necessarily, because use of the waiting strategy creates so much tension that the opponent ends up feeling like they have to attack. And if they feel like they have to attack, in reality they're behind and you're ahead. However, even though the waiting strategy is a very effective core strategy for us, there are situations, particularly when you start to become a more experienced fencer and you're fighting people that are more experienced fencers, where you don't necessarily want to spend all day waiting in those tense circumstances to try to pressure the opponent into attacking. You'd rather seize the initiative immediately, sparing yourself all that tension as well. So what we're going to look at now is a way to do the 10 lessons that is based on seizing the initiative and dictating what happens so that you are ahead immediately. In terms of our 7-word system, this is basically provoke. It has elements of overwhelm because of the intensity with which you do it, but the core idea is that you are doing something that forces a response from the opponent. Now, to force a response from the opponent, it's not enough to make a kind of probing action. You can't make an attack that is only halfway to the target, or that wouldn't really land, or that doesn't have intensity, because you won't draw the kind of determined response from the opponent that you need in order to execute what you want to execute. So all of these drills involve making a single committed attack, an attack that would absolutely hit him if he did not respond. And then when he does respond is when you do what you were already planning to do anyway. Now what you have to understand to actually apply these in bouting is that when you do this, you carry out your plan regardless of what the opponent does. You are dictating, you're not reacting. That is an advanced concept. It's hard to do in practice if you're not very experienced. So we don't want anyone who's new to bouting to even attempt this. This should only be attempted by experienced students. We're going to start with a drill derived from lesson 1 in level 1 of our core curriculum. So normally that would be the opponent attacks the leg and the protagonist shifts and counters to the head. What you're going to see here instead is that the protagonist will attack. The antagonist will defend on St. George, respond with a leg attack, and the protagonist will shift and counter. Okay. You could also counter to the arm. And here's the interesting thing about these exercises. It will frequently work even if he does not do the riposte I want him to do. So now, after I've done several repetitions with a preset riposte, he's now allowed to do any riposte he wants. All right, Seth, you want to come in for the second one? So lesson 2 would normally start on an outside guard, and the antagonist would cut the leg and the protagonist would shift and counter to the arm. Since the protagonist is making the first attack, it's going to start off an inside guard. What's going to happen is that I'm going to cut 2 to draw his response. He's going to parry with an outside guard and then cut from my leg. And that's when I'll shift and counter. thing. After I've done that a few times, I let him make any repost. All right. Matt, want to come in for the third one? So in number 3, of course, that's the only one in the set of 10 lessons where the protagonist actually makes the first movement. Okay, so the way that we're going to do this drill is that I am going to make a cut, he's going to respond with a cut, I'm going to parry, and then I'm going to feint and make a actual cut. So it's attack, riposte, parry, feint, attack. Yeah, and he definitely should attempt to block the final attack. So Seth in for number 4. All right, so lesson 4 is lift and pommel. And again, the variation that we're going to do is the protagonist will make the first attack. So I'm going to cut 7. He's going to respond with cut 7. So he'll parry St. George and repost cut 7. And then I'll lift and pommel. Now we're going to allow him to do any repost he wants. I may have to improvise a little to complete my technique successfully, but the basic idea is that I should try to lift and pommel no matter what he does, and if I have to adjust on the fly, I will. All right, time for 5. Five is the Turkish disarm. Now, of course, for me to do a Turkish disarm, I need to be parrying cut 1. So since I want him to make a cut 1, I'm going to start on the inside guard and cut 2. When he reposts with a cut 1, I'll do Turkish disarm. Now we'll let him do any repost he wants. So I had to adjust what I was doing at the last second, but since I'm moving in really close, it's not that hard to do. That was a little dicey, but we got it. All right, 6. Lesson 6, the Spadroon Guard counter is next. Now, in the lessons, the only thing the Spadroon Guard ever really does is that counter, but it can do a lot more than that. You can pretty much fence from the Spadroon Guard if you have a mind to. So, what we're going to do here is really just a variation on what we did with lesson 1. The protagonist from the Spadroon Guard will chop over for a cut 7. Antagonist will parry St. George and cut to the leg, at which point the protagonist will apply the Spadroon Guard counter. And now where he's allowed to do any repost he likes. 7 is the hanging slip. Now, if you're trying to do a hanging slip using the waiting strategy, you might have noticed that they don't happen that often. Every once in a while you get the chance, but you really have to wait for the opponent to make a committed attack that you can slip. And if he thinks you're just waiting for him, he's a lot less likely to do that. So by using this approach, we pretty much provoke or force the opponent into making a committed attack as his repost, and then we slip that. So I'm going to cut 7, he's going to repost 7, I'll do hanging slip. And now we'll let him do any repost he likes. All right, 8. Eight is the elbow lock. Again, that comes off of a parry against cut 1, so I want to provoke a cut 1, so I'm going to cut 2. I'll cut 2, he reposts cut 1, at which point I do the elbow lock. And now where he has the choice of repost. To get the elbow lock, I went for a bind. Because he's coming in from the other side, so that's the better option from there. All right, lesson 9. Now, lesson 9 is the lift and thrust. And the way that works in the lessons is you parry outside guard, and then you lift the opponent's arm up and thrust. So, if I want him to cut 2, I need to cut 1 to provoke a cut 2. So we're going to start on the outside guard, I'll cut 2, he responds with a cut 1. He can either step with a traverse or forward, it doesn't matter, and then I'll lift and thrust. And now we'll let him choose his repost. When you're doing it in this freeform way, as it would be in a bout, you don't know what repost he's using. You have to have the ability to adapt at the last split second and change what you're doing, however slightly, in order to pull it off. Lesson 10. Okay, so this is in response to a thrust. Now, we have one basic parry for all thrusts and then a backup option. Our basic parry for all thrusts is to sweep it to your outside with an outside half hanger. That's a universal parry because it cuts across all the lines, but there are times where your sword is not in an ideal position to get that parry. And in that scenario, you can parry the thrust using any of the regular guards, and you just stop the thrust and push it to the side. So what we're going to do here is try to get that thrust, parry, and bind that's in less than 10. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 7. He's going to respond with a thrust from the St. George's guard. So that would be a hanging guard thrust down to my body like that. And that's when I'm going to apply that bind. So I cut 7, you parry St. George and thrust down. Got me in the leg. And now, because of course I have no way of knowing that he's going to thrust just because I cut 7 any more than I had any way of knowing he's going to cut the leg. So now we're going to let him do whatever riposte he wants. All right, let's take a little break.